Welcome to the Future of Teamwork. My name's Dane Groeneveld, CEO of HUDDL3 Group, and today joining me from Calgary in Canada, Randy Hagan. So Randy's got a great story coming out of major project developments in the oil and gas industry, where I've done a lot of work also. And he's currently the managing director of Eagle Eye Management. We actually connected over LinkedIn. He made a great post over role players in ice hockey. So we started connecting on Teams, and this is going to be a really fun conversation. So thanks for joining the show, Randy.
Thanks for having me, Dane. And hopefully, over the course of the next little while here, I can share some experiences that will be really helpful to your listeners. So, looking forward to the conversation.
Extremely helpful. I mean, when you think about teams probably don't operate in any harder environments than when you're building a facility in a hazardous industry. So you've seen some pretty cool stuff. Maybe you could share with the listeners a little bit more about your background and how you got into leading teams through
Sure.
these complex projects.
Sure. So, yeah, like you said, I'm living in Calgary, Alberta, in Canada, and I've lived all across Canada. Married, two adult children. We love the outdoors, and I'm a fledgling bass player as well. And like you sort of mentioned, my comment about ice hockey, I guess most people I meet meet Canadians think that, oh, you must be like hockey fans. Well, our whole family has been immersed in it for a long time, like probably close to 25 years. And part of what I'll probably share is maybe some experiences as well with my time in minor hockey coaching. I didn't even play hockey much growing up; just played on the pond. So a little bit about my professional side. Like you said, I worked in the oil and gas industry right out of college, 34 years. Retired from full time work a little over a year ago, and now heading up Eagle Eye Consulting, and hopefully we can kind of chat a little about that later.
Yeah.
The last 20 years was really focused on I'll call it being a project professional, and started out 2002 supervising a group for the first time supervising, and really kind of learning to be a manager, but also looking for those opportunities to be a leader and grow those leadership skills. And I would say that at that around that time was when I came across a video. My wife was working in the bank, and she was asked to watch a video called Gung Ho. And for those who haven't seen it, it's basically using the characterization of three animals to kind of help frame a workplace where this particular supervisor in a manufacturing plant seems to be doing way better than everybody else, and he's got these uses these animals as a characterization, like I said, of like the spirit of the squirrel, which is like worthwhile work. What's the purpose of the work? With the way of the beaver, which is like allow the people within a certain framework to figure out how to get the work done, and then the gift of the goose, which was cheering each other on. And that one I grabbed pretty quickly and tried to utilize it in that group at the time to kind of get people, commending each other within the group. And I've used it
Yeah.
numerous times. Um, moving ahead a little bit, back in I think it was about 2010, I moved to Calgary, and then eventually I got the opportunity to head up a new group, brand new from scratch,
Yeah.
sustainable project group for a major oil sands operation. One of the biggest challenges of my career, and just trying to figure out how to get multiple stakeholders to function together and so on. And maybe we'll touch on it a little bit. I'll just briefly kind of describe it right now as like creating a vision for my group, um, and just the way that we would function within our regular interactions, um, and within that vision, within the role statements, and then also we leverage um, the services of what I call specialized project or organizational effectiveness consultant. Really, kind of
Yep.
a targeted workshop. Because what I like to say is when a consultant comes to me, and I am a consultant now, is I would say, okay, I don't want the whole program. Here's what I'm doing. how can you help me? And can we do something very targeted, very efficient, not just on dollars, but like people's time is really valuable. I need to
Yeah.
convince people that it's going to be worth their while to sit down together and figure this thing out because we've done as much as we can ourselves, and then now we need some support. So, and then the other one that was probably the most significant is building a new cogen facility at our refinery in Edmonton, and that was before I became an advisor, a principal engineer within the company. That was kind of my last kind of like real opportunity to lead a team. Uh,
Yeah.
Again, like vision statements, roles, um, clarifying what it meant to be part of the team. And then that I felt that what that did was it set us up for success, particularly when we got to the spring of, because we started the project in late 2017. And by March of 2020, we all know what happened. We weren't quite complete at that time.
Yep.
And we went through the rest of that year until September, finishing construction and starting up flawlessly. We had a few problems, but I
Every
felt
facility does.
I felt like the culture that we created got us through some of
Yeah.
those challenges. And it's like a family, right? It's like there's still times when there's people that, we have to work through things in some of our conflicts, right? And we can talk a
Yeah.
little bit
That's
more about that later. So
No, I look forward to digging into that one. And there's some great points that you raised there in sort of your story, Randy, around. I love the gung ho video, so we're definitely going to dig into that.
yeah,
To think that someone had that figured out 20 years ago, and we're only just finding it all over again now post COVID. It's amazing how often the answers have existed for a long time, but they just need to be repackaged by the right person.
right.
And then on the Cogen facility, that more recent project, what's always fascinated me, and probably a reason that I'm doing so much work here in teamwork with all of these guests, is that I've seen a lot of projects over my career, and I've always loved the fact that you bring together this team of diverse people. It's not always just the owner; it could be the contractors, it could be local service providers, scaffolding, lighting, you name it, community members. But you bring all of these people together in a team environment, and you've got a clear, defined start and finish. And yet, 10 years later, 20 years later, everyone's talking about what it was like to be on that team if they had a good
Right.
experience.
Right.
There's something really cool about those large physical facilities projects.
And I don't know what the rest of listeners experience, but I would say within our there are um, lots of training for things like contracting, safety management, project planning. We have some leadership um, courses, but to actually get that ingrained in the way people function, it requires, the individual, particularly the project manager, to have that desire. And we were talking about hockey earlier. I would say hockey for me, especially minor hockey coaching, is kind of probably been a big part of how I learned a lot about dealing with people. And so there's almost like this transition back and forth between, and when you work for a large company, you learn certain, I'll call it management techniques, especially in projects where you want certain analytics to understand what's going well and how you're performing rather than waiting until the end. And then the people side is when you're dealing with a bunch of young people and their parents, um,
Yeah.
you have to learn to uh, understand how to communicate not just for the group but also each individual, learning about each individual. And for a number of the years, like 10 or 12 years while I was involved in hockey coaching, I was assistant coach, and you would watch people in action where at the beginning of the year, everybody's got these, you know, great plans. And then as the year unfolds, certain things start to surface, and you start to ask yourself, well, what is this? Is this human nature that certain individuals are becoming what I'll call selfish, right? And other teams are just functioning better. And then the nice thing with sports, not everybody likes sports, but what I like is it's instantaneous feedback, right? Like within a
Yeah.
fairly short period of time, you know what the result is, and there's a lot of factors that go into that. Like just like this week when Vegas won the Stanley Cup, and it's like when people start talking about, well, what was different? Well, new coach this year, and they used the word accountability. Everybody started talking about he holds people accountable, that the team members hold each other accountable. Well, that's what I found when I looked at coaches that were really good is
Yeah.
they were good at communicating, and as well as back to the what are we trying to do here. So even after a practice, they would go into the dressing room and say, we were working on these things, this is where we're going, this is the kind of team we're going to be, and this is why we're working on these things in practice. And then so when I got to be the last time I was a head coach, yeah, I utilized a lot of those techniques that I saw from the really good coaches, and then
Yeah.
also some team building stuff that I'd already learned from work. It's like getting everybody together. They all introduce themselves because just like a project, a lot of times everybody's new. Almost everybody doesn't know each other from previous, particularly if you start
Yeah.
outside the company with contractors and other stakeholders. So everybody introduced themselves, and I asked them, okay, we're going to go around the room and just say a couple of things about yourself that are non-hockey related. Because we know who
Yeah.
you are as a hockey player. Like you're going to play hockey, right? You're left wing, whatever. And then we got input for like what should our goals be for the year. And interesting story, we got into a tough patch a couple months later, and we had on a losing streak, and I said, do you guys remember what our goals were? And they could list them all off, every
Yeah.
single one of them, right? And just like that, kind of tying that back to, okay, they contributed, and some of them were like, wow, I don't know how we're going to do this, right? Like making like the state finals for that level is like as
Yeah.
provincial in Canada,
Yeah.
and just the way that all came together, and then also teaching the captains, because there's a captain, two assistant captains, teaching them to be leaders. And then lo and behold, they came to us, the coaches, before one of the most important games of the year and said, I know you guys always come in and you talk to us beforehand. Can you come in early? Because we want to talk to the team before we come out. One of the best games
Nice.
I've ever been
Yeah.
involved. Right. And it's like,
Yeah.
oh, right. So it was like, so again, like, it's an environment, and everybody has their different unique things that they're interested in outside of work. But to be able to tie that together, like I said, I was using analytics because I didn't play the game. I was collecting
Yes.
information that when the games became crucial, it's like, okay, that person always makes most of their shots from this location. When you're on the ice, you two people, you're going to take away their opportunity. They're like, how do you know that? And I'm like, well, we've been collecting this information all season. I'm like, oh, like it's like we can be better than them, or we just play better than them,
Yeah.
right? So,
I think that's huge, and I think it's funny as you're sharing that story, Randy. It made me think back to you made mention that not everyone loves sports, but sports and projects have something in common, which is there is a clock. There is a schedule to the game or to when the project finishes, and there are a lot of metrics along the way. When people are running like regular sustaining operations, maintaining a unit, for example, or running an administration function, that there aren't always the clarity of clock and metrics.
right,
But that's I think what's changing in the world of work and what's exciting for teams is that we're moving from people working in processes to people working in more projects. I think with generative AI, with technology in general, with some of the collaboration that we're starting to see in the workplace, everyone's moving towards projects. So that's why this conversation's so relevant for a lot of our listeners.
right,
And when you think about a project or a sports team playing a sports game, that kind of hygiene that you said at the beginning of the season or at the beginning of the project's critical.
right,
It's huge because going back to your three animals, I love the Beaver framework, which is giving, once you set those goals, like you mentioned of the captains, you give the team the autonomy to kind of determine how they're going to do the work because you've set the goals and behaviors. So
right.
that seems powerful for anyone out there running a small team or a small project.
And that kind of I think of the word empowerment, which I've seen that overused many times. And there was one particular time on the Cogen project where I decided to do a topic on empowerment. And for myself, it was trying to continue to build on what we were already, the team I was leading, the type of team culture I wanted to have, including things like, effective team players, the vision is having a conversation about empowerment. And a lot of times I found, and maybe it's just my generation, is people want to be empowered. They feel like I'm going to hand them something. Okay, I'm going to give you control. Well, it actually works at least 50-50, which is when you are empowered and you're great at being empowered, you know how to have a conversation with the person that is empowering you and saying, okay, I've got this situation. I don't have all the answers yet, but I'm going to get back to you in the next couple of days once I've kind of captured all the information and I can present to you what I think are a few options. I'm working with these people on it. So they kind of keep you up to date, right? They don't wait until, oh, things are really in the ditch. And now I need you to stand in now and help me figure this out. And it's like, well, how long have you known about this? Well, part of being empowered is understanding that balance of I can work with the other team members, like on a Cogen project. If you're an engineering manager and you're working closely with this construction manager and you're building something, I don't need to know everything that's going on. You guys are closer to the information. You know way more about what's going on than me. And so take care of that. But if we're in a team meeting and you go, oh, by the way, we've just noticed this particular issue, myself and so are on it. We're going to cycle back with the engineering team. And if there's anything you need to be aware of, Randy, like we'll let you know if this is going to have a big impact on like the metric, like the schedule is going to get blown out a month or whatever, right? So that to me, that's part of empowerment is, like talking that through, and then it helps to find that balance between is the person junior and highly motivated, or is the person very experienced and maybe the motivation or the way they've had to behave in the past is not quite the same. So having that discussion, ends up like one of the many things that can create the team environment that when you really hit big challenges, you can function as opposed to everything goes through the project manager, right? Like
Bottleneck.
can't
Yeah.
get everything done. You can't get things done. So
Yeah. No, that's a good point. That it ties back to that other key word you mentioned earlier, Randy. What I heard you say there is that when you give people empowerment, empowerment comes with accountability.
right,
Because if something is falling behind schedule, if we're starting to see some safety metrics
right,
slipping, that if you're going to have that empowerment, you've got to be accountable to bringing that up and sharing it with the team and acting,
right.
uh, which is really big. When you think about, I liked your example there of engineering manager and construction manager. I may be way off par here, but from my experience putting some people on these projects in the past, the engineering team and construction team didn't always get along, and there were always egos and hard heads on both sides. And I'm sure that's true for other functions, but I just saw it more between engineering and construction. What is it about those behaviors that you set early in a team environment that helps the team know how to behave when, invariably there's always going to be egos at play and there's going to be different opinions and different levels of information. So how does that behavior start to bridge through and help that team work through those natural conflicts and challenges?
So, in my experience, there are symptoms and then there's subcultures.
Okay.
I think, I know as a junior engineer, there's actually a podcast that I follow on LinkedIn as well. And I think they're called Construction Brothers or something like that. And I made a
Okay.
comment on one of their posts about like, I remember when I was a young engineer, when you walk out there, it's almost like they want to make you feel uncomfortable, right? So it's a little bit of that culture of like,
Needle
or
you.
yeah, you're in our place now, right? And then
Yeah.
the flip side that I've seen is great construction professionals get into an engineering office and they get placed in a cubicle. They're told that they're going to provide constructability input, and no one comes to see them, and they don't go to see anybody, right?
Yeah.
Well, the great ones, what they would do in terms of personal interactions is they go around, they meet with the people that are and get to know them as an individual, and then say, okay, how about I sit down with you on a certain frequency see what you're working on. Maybe I can grab it and I can look at it and I can give you some input. Otherwise, what happens and where the real conflict starts, I think,
Yeah.
early on in the project is the engineering folks have already got to the point where they've basically almost completed their work. A
Yeah.
construction person looks at it and goes, I can't build that, right?
Yeah.
And then they try
Yeah.
to force it and go, no, you have to change it. And the engineering person says, listen, and they might talk in a certain way, but what I hear is, I've finished my work. I don't want to go back and redo it now. I've got other things I got to do, right? And
Yeah.
he likes redoing things. And so I think it ties a bit to um, some of the some of the aspects of effective team members, right? Like that
Mhm.
communication aspect of seeking other team members out. Now, the the team leader, the overall project manager, and in my case on a Cogen project, there's a project manager for the engineering, procurement, construction organization, which is a
Yeah.
complete organization, and then myself. And that's so us getting together and saying, what are the things that we're going to do to help ensure we're facilitating this and we're encouraging it. And then if we have to, we say, no, that's not the way we work here. We're going to work differently than you might have in the past. And then
Yeah.
listen to how people respond and go, there's got to be a reason for this, why this person is behaving this way, because it's been rewarded in the past, they've been burned in the past, right?
Yeah.
And how do we kind of get that out in the open, maybe not in a big team building environment, but maybe as a subset of folks sitting down and going through and saying, we want this to be different. We want to function different.
Yeah.
We want to win. We want you guys to be successful. How do we help you be successful? And that's kind of what I've seen. And I mean, I love construction, and
Yeah.
I'm not as experienced in engineering, but I like the technical part. But like that's kind of what I see is these two cultures that, and hopefully I've described it sufficiently. I'm not sure. Like maybe you can.
Yeah, no, I think you have, and I've seen just the way you described that. I've seen the same between a sales team and a success team, or
Right,
a sales team and a development team in a software business. I think you're gonna. I like the way you called it symptoms and subcultures,
right,
and that seeking others out, seeking other team members out is what I wrote that you said.
right,
That particularly in a digital world that we're moving more and more into. I know when you're constructing a facility, everyone's going to have a lot more time face to face, but in a digital world for people that are managing virtual projects, that it takes a lot of intentionality to seek others out. Kind of like your construction guy in a cubicle in the engineering office.
right.
They have to physically get up, set meetings, walk the floor, and I think teams need to be thinking about that.
And get to know people, right? Like that's the thing is like where do you find those common things? Like maybe the construction. It seems silly, but my son's a project manager, and I was telling him this thing. I was like, he was in a situation where a senior person, he wasn't sure how this person, what they thought of him, and I said, what kind of interest do they have? And he says, well, I know he likes baseball because I hear him talking about baseball all the time. I'm like, well, you like
Yeah,
watching baseball, so just say, hey, did you see the game last night? Hey, what'd you think of that pitch or whatever? All of a sudden the person starts coming towards him, coming into his office and saying same thing, right? So you find those things that are common, then you get to know each other as people, and you go, okay, so that Randy guy's not too bad, that Dane guy's not too bad. I was actually talking to him, and he's fairly approachable, and he actually likes
yeah,
baseball, right? And then
yeah,
so it becomes something in common. Then you get to know them as people. I think you're more likely to make the next step, which is, can I figure out a way to understand where you're coming from, even if I don't
yeah,
agree with you on a particular
yeah,
solution, whether it's a technical solution or you have an opinion on how something should get done. And
yeah,
I'm willing to listen. That's the other part. Listen to what you're saying. I'll ask understanding questions. Maybe I'll say, let me take that away and see if we can, maybe we'll get back together and we'll talk about it again because, I need to think about what you're saying because I haven't seen it like that before. Or that's something I don't know if I can live with. Or, there's so many
yeah,
aspects to each of these things, right? Of being a more effective team and then being an effective leader, right? It's a lot of the same elements to it of,
yeah. There's a lot, and actually, that reminds me. One of my good friends and an OD consultant, Anna Carrol. She does a lot of work on effective feedback and everyday feedback. And she gave me this acronym COIN, and it was connect. So your baseball example is a great one. If you're connecting with people, it's easier to start a feedback discussion or a conflict resolution. You connect, then you state your observation. Hey, Randy, I've observed this from the plan or from your behavior or what your team did out here.
Mhm.
And then explain the implication of that to them so that they're not immediately going to what they think that means and what that, the implication of my observation that, your team is turning up late to the toolbox talks is that that team's not part of our overall safety culture or whatever else it is. And so next steps, I'm thinking it would be a good idea to do this. What do you think? Now you've connected and you've given the other person an opportunity to listen to your full story. You haven't kind of gone in there and hit them with the why aren't you guys in the toolbox
Right.
meetings,
Right.
and started the conflict. And they've now got an opportunity, having listened, to explain to you, discuss, ask more questions. So I think it can have a lot more impact.
Yeah, I think I mentioned the effective team members, kind of like it's like a seven category
Yeah,
document that I've put together to try to supplement things like clear role statements, vision, a lot of those other things. And the one thing that kind of got updated two or three times in the iterations as I was creating that was the one on conflict management. And
yeah,
kind of looking at it at myself here, like one of the things is like being proactive. Like when I think about evaluating candidates that I've come across it for roles, especially leadership roles, and I ask them for a specific example on where they've been in a situation where there's conflict. And the typical is going to be where conflict has already happened and now they're working through it. The good to great ones are the ones who they kind of sense there's the potential for conflict. They seek out the issue or the person, even though it might be uncomfortable, sit down, listen, like we were saying, and
yeah,
then go, okay, I have a different perspective. I need to think about this because I can't get there yet. Right. And so, like, wanting to at least be open enough to change your own biases and
yeah,
assumptions. Right.
yeah,
And it might seem simple enough when you're talking about putting pipe together on a facilities project or whatever, but it typically starts with, well, I know what I know because I've got 30 years of experience. What do you know?
yeah,
And that just,
yeah,
it's like people are, especially when you put a whole bunch of guys together, guys are egotists, right? And
yeah,
so like, each guy is going to be like, well, I'm like, I know more than you do because I got this much experience. Like, okay, wait a second. Like we have a mission here that we're trying to accomplish. So do we have the right people on the task or on the, and okay, are we really coming up with the right solution or is it just your solution? And have you really seen everything? How could some
yeah.
person see everything, right?
And why is what happened there relevant to what we're trying to do here? Like that's always a question. I think one of the big problems when people start to defend their position is they're saying this is why we have to do it my way rather than saying why could we not do it
Yeah,
this other way. And I loved it. Actually got your document here, under effectively manages conflict. You continue to use this word seeking, which I think is a really powerful word in the context that you're using it. I haven't heard it as much in conversations lately, but seeking out others, and in this one, seeking common ground. But seeking is an active,
right.
intentional effort, and I think the going back to the top of this document, commitment to being an effective team member or team player. Everyone has a role in being an effective team member. So I like that seeking
Right.
kind of dynamic.
Well, and you can be like hockey teams, you see it, or sports teams is like media tries to figure out what's wrong with the team when they're not functioning properly. So they got all the right talent, and for some reason,
Yeah,
they're not. And then the season's over, then the stories come out. Well, so and so didn't like playing with so and so, or can't play for that coach anymore, or whatever. Right. So then the conflict comes out, and you go, oh, okay, well there we go. Like we got, they had all the right talent, they had all the right people in the right positions, and
yeah,
the interactions. that you need to function at higher and higher performance levels isn't there because
Yeah.
people have gotten into a position where they don't like the style of play or they don't like the way they've been utilized.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's not as obvious where team members, I've seen it more on the minor, sports like minor hockey, where
Yeah.
as it goes on, it's like, well, maybe someone's, grandmother wants them to be scoring more goals and they won't pass the puck. And then people are arguing on, it's like, again, it's like, it comes back to like, what's the human tendency? Self, looking at
Yeah.
themselves, looking at our own assumptions, and how do you flip that switch yourself and go out looking for, okay, do I have the right perspective here? Help me understand.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. I love that. And talking about perspective, I know before the show we were talking about corporations have visions, corporate visions, but you've had some success both at the team level in hockey, but also in the projects around setting a vision for the project, which allows everyone to seek that common ground, like you stated here, and to have a shared fate. So maybe could you share a little bit more with the listeners how you went about on that Strathcona Cogen project, how you went about sort of setting a vision that everyone could rally around in that
Sure.
setting?
So I guess the first thing I would say is in my experience, oil and gas, being an engineer in a company that it became more and more work process driven, I found it
Yeah.
really hard to create a vision. And the first time actually before the Cogen, it was like back in 2012, 13. I was setting up that sustaining project group, and one of my leaders came to me and said, "Randy, you really need," and she did this a couple of times. "You really need to like paint a picture of where we're going here. Like people are like trying
Yeah.
to understand where we're going. What are we trying to accomplish? What does our group look like a year from now? What are we doing, and so on." And I'm like, I don't know, right? So then I'll kind of keep it brief, but like I was on a plane. Frankly, I was reading this article about transformational leadership and everything kind of came together. I started like everything came pouring into my head, and I just started like writing a bunch of thoughts down, and then eventually I framed it into a statement, and then I had a bunch of enabling aspects to it. So then when I got in 2017, 18, I was kind of thinking the same thing is like, I want to make sure that our team kind of has a sense of where we're going. Where are we, whether it's mission or vision, and sometimes people use those interchangeably. Frankly, I've done it myself. It's like, oh, wait a second, we're building a facility. It's a gas powered turbine. We're going to bring natural gas in. We're going to produce steam and electricity. Like, how do I write a vision for something like that? And then eventually, again, light bulb goes on. It's like, well, this is a really important capital project for the site and for the corporation. A lot
Yeah.
of money, $250 million, and um, this is going to make a big difference because we haven't done a project like this at this site or in the company in a long time. And
Yeah.
so this could be a stepping stone. If we do this well, it could be a stepping stone, not just for the site in terms of taking them to the next level as far as their energy efficiency, but also
Mhm.
attracting more capital. So that became the statement was something related to that. And then the rest was like, we care about each other enough that, we want people to go home safely. Right. And I could use
Yeah.
the word nobody gets hurt, which is the ExxonMobil terminology. But
Yeah.
like, how do you say that in a way where you expect people when they read it to go, okay, so that's what that means. We care enough.
There's a why. There's a
Yes,
why in the
yeah.
statement,
There's
home
a purpose
safely.
behind
Yeah.
it. And then when it came to how we communicate, how we interact, people like love being part of the team.
Yeah.
Things like that. They were all like each statement was meant to be, capturing that innate human feeling of wanting to be part of something great, right? And so when you look at a vision statement, for me anyway, when it's written that way, then most people, not everybody, I mean, there's some cold, callous people that go, I don't need one of those. Just tell me what my job is. I'll go do
Let me
my
get
job.
on with
It's
it.
like, and that's fine. I mean, they're great. The people like that are great. Like they
Yeah.
know where they stand, right? And um, but it becomes something that you have to continually. You can't just one and done it, like And I've seen that
Yeah.
times too, where it's like team building, and I guess broader on team building. I've seen situations, even on the Cogen project, where someone said, "Well, that's not really team building. We're getting together to talk about quarterly priorities." Well, as part of it is each lead has to come with like what's important, what do they need, to accomplish that, and
Yeah.
is it really the top two or three things for this quarter? And then, or sitting down and going through role statements and saying, okay, so what do I need from you? What are you going to deliver to me? And they go, that's not team building. That's like, well, it is part of the framework of ensuring the team is talking to each other and not just going through follow-up lists, right? And going,
Yeah.
okay, yeah, this is what we did this week. Move that to 2 weeks from now. I was like, okay, that's not team building. That's just like the way you function. Sit down, right? And then the other thing I've seen in teams, team building, is you bring a consultant in, they do a nice long
Yeah.
presentation, people do some breakout sessions, then they go for some drinks afterwards and a social gathering, and then it's over, right?
Yeah.
Everybody
Yeah.
goes back to their cubicle, their office, and somehow things get done. It's like, well, yeah, it'll get done, but how about like, I've seen project managers and leaders have like coffee chats on Friday morning. They just want to sit down, or maybe Monday morning, say, how was your weekend? What were you guys doing? What were you ladies? Okay, that's great. That sounds like a lot of fun. The other one I really like is integrating it into like a monthly staff meeting, which is things like
Yeah.
one I've used is called Thumbs Up, which is it's got a big thumb on it, and seeing experienced people recognize a junior person for something that they went above and beyond to accomplish, or they taught them something about a computer technology that they wouldn't have.
Yeah.
Almost like reverse mentoring. Junior people usually come up with them really quickly because they get so much coaching and advising,
Yeah.
and mentoring, right? So, and when it first starts, you sort of have to have a few of your own. And then it became like
Yeah.
football teams. People started putting them outside their office and stacking them up. Like, I've got five,
How cool.
right? And so,
So they'd have a big thumbs up.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
That's great.
like, back to us saying this. So, like, you're creating, as a leader, you want to create the environment of interaction and how people should function, and it goes without saying, like, if you can, you select people, because it's very hard to change people. So you select the great people, best people you
Yeah.
can, in terms of competency and how they believe in functioning and interacting with others on a team.
Yeah.
Then creating things like vision and those things like the effective team players to say, this is the type of culture that we believe in. What do you guys think? Get some input, update it, make sure people keep it in their workplace. And then the
Yeah.
regular monthly check-ins of like, okay, let's get everybody to take an opportunity to talk about a team building topic every month, you know,
Yeah.
and you pick it. Like, if you're assigned, you pick what you want it to be. If you're on a cycling team, talk about that. If
Yep.
you read a particularly good book recently and you like to talk about what you get out of the book, and then
Yep.
it keeps it perpetuating and growing, and everybody wants to be a part of it. Right? And that's what you
Yeah.
really notice. What you really notice is when
Yeah.
people outside of the group want in the group.
I I totally agree with you. And you can also see it when it's not working because no one wants to stay with the project. And as we both know, it's pretty painful when you start losing top talent towards the end of a project. And that's tricky, I think, in any environment, whether it's a facility or a software project or anything, or a key event.
Right.
That's pretty tricky. But I like the way you use vision there in the project as far as that concept of painting a picture. Because you're right, you don't have to go and replace the corporate vision. It can it can coexist.
Right.
But painting a picture for what does this project mean for the facility, the community, the team that's in it, it creates clarity. And I also really appreciate, Randy, the way you explained the importance of role statements and leaders giving their updates. You tied that back into, I think, the gung ho video again,
Right. Right.
in terms of not only the autonomy to do your own work, but also the ability for each other to celebrate.
Right.
And I think that's very real because one thing I'm seeing from no matter who we speak to as a guest, no matter what their background is, whether they're a storytelling consultant, a founder, a former project manager, a business executive, clarity is one thing that is critical to teams and teams' performance, and it's part of team building. You don't have to be out on the go-karts or paintballing.
Right.
Just sharing clarity with each other around how to seek each other out, how to help each other achieve success and celebrate that success is it seems to keep showing up as one of those top three.
Right. I would agree. And then the other one that I would say, back to the role statement, I, especially for my direct reports, um, I made sure I was very intentional in how those were written, and with the individual, like with the construction manager, engineering managers, getting very intentional because they can be very. The easiest thing to do is just take the generic one from the company and go, "You're a construction manager. You got all this stuff. Here's all your tasks, right?" And
Yeah,
so when you frame that, it's still pretty high level relative to something like, well, how do we function in a weekly update meeting? Well, in there, there's like a bit of a what I call process, like what's the purpose of the meeting, what's the expected results, and what's everybody supposed to do to prepare. And
yeah,
you sort of touched on it, and that's why I want to bring this one up too, is we didn't expect people to give updates on every single thing. If there's something that you're responsible for, if you have to, you declare, okay, I'm working this item and I'm going to need
yeah,
some help from you and you on this one. And they might have already been doing it. And so we had like two purposes. Like, you're not just there to give me an update because I might go, that's nice, but you really should make sure that so and so is aware. And they go, oh, I didn't realize that. Okay, so that's got to be ready in the next couple of weeks. Yeah, we better get together and work through that. So
yeah,
that's really about facilitating the interactions of what's really important and what do we got to get done, and or what are your issues or challenges, and then maybe someone can say, "Hey, I can help you with
yeah,
that," right? And that's what
yeah.
it's meant
No,
to do, right? And 45 minutes. We had meetings where we said we're done in like 20 minutes.
yeah, because you're able to move through what's important and
Right.
give everyone their time back. Yeah, I like that a lot.
And
So I,
so yeah,
we've covered a lot of really cool ground. I'm going to get Alicia to share the gung ho video, so we'll connect with you on that because I'm sure a lot
sure.
of our listeners will like to get into that a little bit more. But I've got a final question for you on the future of teams and teamwork, and it ties into what you're doing now with Eagle Eye. I read an article the other day that said there are some companies out there now that are removing managers from the org charts and replacing them with coaches because they see the value that a coach can bring in some of these things that we've talked about today in helping teams set vision, set clarity around role statements, who to select on the team, how to set behaviors. And I think it's going to be part of the future because I think you're going to see more and more teams forming for short projects where you don't need a manager, but you do need a coach. So perhaps you could share a little bit more about your vision for Eagle Eye and the type of coaching you're excited about getting out there and doing with business owners and project leaders.
So the thing I always believe in, even when I was leading an effort, is I would like to have the support of an experienced person on a frequent basis, as opposed to, we're done, I've written the project plan, can you review the project plan and then give me like 100 comments, right? And so I was leading a project one time where it was like $2.5 billion project, and I said, hey, can you come to the plot plan review with me, because you've run a project maybe not this size before, but maybe you as an advisor can come. And so,
Yeah,
to get back to answering your question, that's what I can utilize my experiences as a project management professional, as a leader, and working with either teams or with the project with the management team. So, as an example, uh, the last year or so, two relatively junior project managers combined, their running projects worth over $250 million Canadian. So, um, and I would meet with them typically weekly for an hour or so, and just touching base on a few key items, and they would come prepared with like, a what's your key issues? Okay, did that one get resolved? Okay, you address this. What's coming up over the next 2 or 3 weeks? Oh, have you thought of this? Can you make sure, like, okay, where's the safety program from the contractor? And what's in there? Have they got something for, like, dropping objects from heights or whatever? Oh, okay, and then
yeah,
so things that more looking forward than anything, particularly for project managers, because if you're junior, you haven't seen it before. When an experienced person is working with someone who's got the responsibility, feels empowered, but they have the ability to talk to somebody other than their manager because it's not going
Yeah.
to become a performance issue, and they can open up and share what they're concerned about. And then even aspects like if a project manager is dealing with a commercial negotiation,
Yeah.
I would even ask them questions like, okay, what was the nonverbal communication back and forth? And how did you assert yourself? You're the project manager for the client. And even though you might be a junior person, you need to act like you're in charge. Things like that. They're just simple
Yeah.
things. The way to work as opposed to what you should be thinking about, and doing that frequently as opposed to now we've got a problem. We need someone to come in and do an assessment, figure out what's wrong and how to fix it, and we're 6 months behind. Like that's not meaningful for anyone. And I know in our organization, each project that's approved has a reason. It could be a regulatory requirement. It could
Yep.
be base business. It could be we're going after a certain opportunity. This is worth so much a month. We want to stay on track and we don't want to be late. Right.
Yep.
And
Yep.
then the other vision I haven't done this yet, but I've done a bit of it with more individuals, is I think I can add a lot of value when their project teams are doing their stewardships. Most organizations are going to do some sort of regular stewardship
Yep.
monthly. They come in. I'm sitting with the management team. I'm asking questions because they might be business line people. They could be commercial people. They could be operations people. And they go, I've never run a project before. We've never had one this size in our organization. We've hired this person. We think they're pretty good at what they do. Can you spend some time with them? And then also sit in with us as the presentation of the monthly updates being done, and then not only asking the questions but giving us a debrief afterwards and go, okay, so how do you think things are going? Where do you think the soft spots are here, the risks, and why, and what should we do about it, right? And then they take the responsibility to, because it's line management, like to ensure that they're taking the action they need to keep it on track. But it's usually quality, cost, and time, right? I mean, there's safety as well.
Yeah.
There's no sense of having a great project that was done on time, on cost, and it's not functioning the way the
It's
operation
gonna break.
expected to be, right?
Yeah.
Doesn't
Yeah.
doesn't meet the spec or whatever. So
Yeah.
I'm not sure if that
That's
paints a picture. It's
It does. It paints a great picture, and I think it does tie into that article, which I'll also have Alicia share with this podcast, Randy, which is that coaching on a frequent basis can actually be more powerful than having a manager sitting over, hovering over, because it creates that growth. I love that you started with the two more junior project managers. It creates growth, and again, going back to the gung ho, the three spirit animals in
right.
the beaver. If you're creating a safe framework by bringing a coach that has the experience, that's looking forward, not reacting, then you're creating room for those individuals to learn a little bit by putting their hands on the hot stove and going ouch, but also from getting ahead, from starting to ask those questions, role play, maybe a conversation with a contractor or a question they need to ask. I think that's super powerful. And I've been through a few projects, not building facilities, but a few projects where I feel like if I'd had a coach that I could have checked in with once or twice a week, they may have given me the confidence, the courage, or just the state of mind space to seek out the right question to ask and what to listen for, which is often a big gap of mine when I'm running projects and not putting enough time and focus into any one thing enough.
Well, I think it comes with experience, and it's like you're saying, the role players, and it also reminds me of a really great minor hockey coach that I worked with. He actually played pro for a little bit, and he used to say, "This is a simple game," and then he would describe stuff. And I'm like, yeah, I guess it is simple. And for me, if I'm dealing with
Yeah,
a facilities project, for me, it's like I see things that they can't see because they have 10 years of experience. I have like 35. And so
yeah,
I have the right attitude of like helping them to understand the why, and then
yeah,
they do the work. They learn at an accelerated pace. It's amazing how quickly they learn. Like, and they're given an opportunity in a way because they have a huge challenge, but they just need someone where they feel safe, where they can be vulnerable and talk about what they feel is happening. And then they go,
yeah.
okay. And then their confidence level increases and then they go and get the job done.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely it. Well, I can already see a title for Alicia, who's normally brilliant at pulling these up for this episode. So it's going to be all about seeking out learning, seeking out growth, seeking
Right.
out common ground, seeking out others. I really like what you bring from the ice rink and from the major project environments to teams, particularly teams taking on complex projects. So thanks again, Randy, for joining us. And if any of our listeners are tackling a project and wouldn't mind reaching out to you and maybe getting some coaching, some consulting hours, how do they best find you?
Reach out to me on LinkedIn. You can find me under Eagle Eye Management Solutions, Randy Hagan. I think that should work fairly well. And
Perfect.
um, I think, and then my contact information is on there. My email, my cell number, I believe, is on there as well. So I would
Great.
look forward to hearing from people, even if it's just to have a conversation. Start out,
Yeah,
and possibly it's a conversation, and then we go from there.
I love it. Well, hopefully we'll find some other ways to collaborate in the future too. So thanks again for taking the time, Randy. It's been a wonderful conversation.
Yeah. Thanks for having me, Dane. Appreciate it. Take care.